would like to welcome you to WebEdge webinar series. So today's topic is Agile using Azure Boards, which is basically a small subset of Azure DevOps. So we will end up covering Azure DevOps, the bigger picture of what exactly Azure DevOps is, and what's the role of Azure Boards in that Azure DevOps technology. And one small note, so I'm under the weather, so I have a fairly hoarse throat, and I'll do my best to speak as loud and clear as possible. Okay, regarding web aid solutions, and yes, there's a question in the chat window. Yes, we are recording the session, and you'll be able to access it after it has been processed by our admin team. So it will be uploaded to our portal, and you'll be able to access the webinar. Okay, so regarding Web Solutions, so Web Solutions is an IT training company, and we specialize in various areas like AWS Cloud, Microsoft, Azure, even the non-Azure stuff as well as Agile, DevOps, etc. So you can see what technologies are mentioned here. Plus, you can always get in touch with us, and if you have any requirements, just let us know. We can offer you custom solutions as well. Okay, and if you want to see additional webinars, we continuously offer different webinars. They're all complimentary, free of cost. You can go to this particular URL, and you'll be able to see what other webinars we are offering. So from time to time, you can keep on checking our website, and you'll see what webinars we have. And yes, regarding the question where you asked whether we are recording the session, so yes, we are recording the session, and it will not be uploaded in real time, but once our admin team has processed it, you'll be able to go to this YouTube link and just search for this particular webinar. Okay, so this webinar, like I mentioned previously, is about Azure Boards and Azure DevOps. So we will discuss what exactly Azure Boards is, how you can use it as an Agile project management solution, how you can maintain your prod backlogs, sprint backlogs, in short, plan your project. So for example, if some of you are using Jira software or some other equivalent software, you will notice that Azure lets you do all of that stuff here in Azure DevOps. So Azure DevOps, it's a huge technology, and it offers you lots of bells and whistles. We will also talk about Azure Repos, which is basically the Git or TFVC, Team Foundation Version Control sort of solution. So if anyone is coming from the TFS background, Team Foundation server, you will notice that TFS, it's dead, and instead Microsoft ended up revamping it and renaming it to Azure DevOps. So Azure DevOps is nothing but just the new enhanced version or replacement for TFS. So it lets you utilize your source control repositories such as Git and also TFVC, Team Foundation Version Control as well. And Azure DevOps also lets you utilize CI, continuous integration. So we will see to some extent what exactly CI is, how you can configure it a bit, and I'll show you an end-to-end example basically. So it will be possible for you to use this Azure DevOps as an end-to-end solution, which has the support for planning, for source control management, for continuous integration, continuous delivery or deployment, and we can also maintain your test plans as well. So this is the agenda for this particular webinar. And before we continue with this webinar, I'm going to open up this poll. So let me launch this poll. Okay, so on your side, you should see a bunch of options. So are you using another solution and like Jira software and considering Azure as a replacement, or you're already using Azure Boards, you want to get more info about it, or you're also planning to utilize the DevOps features such as CI/CD, test plans, and whatnot. So I'll give you a few more seconds. You can go through this poll. Okay, so in general, it seems like most of you are using some other solution and you're considering using Azure Boards as an equivalent solution. So definitely if you're using Jira software or version 1 or some other equivalent solution, you will notice that Azure Boards, it does offer you lots of bells and whistles. So it's basically a one-stop solution that offers you the end-to-end DevOps sort of concepts. Okay, so let's first of all get started with what exactly DevOps is before we discuss Azure Board, CI/CD, and whatnot. So DevOps overall, it's basically the end-to-end process. So how you want to develop your application, or let's not call it an application, let's call it a solution. So you'll have some problem, business-oriented problem, you'll want to solve it. So whatever it takes to solve that problem, what's the end-to-end process for that? That is basically recommended or suggested by DevOps. And sure, you can always fine tune it. You can add more steps to your pipeline if you want, but it does suggest some sort of a canned out of the box sort of pipeline as well. Then it's also the culture. So culture basically means that when you use waterfall, the traditional approach, usually you have to go through the analysis, let's say planning or analysis, then you get to utilize. Oh, are you sharing slides? Let me actually double check. I seems to be sharing it. I have the show button enabled. Oh, you're still seeing a quick panel? Okay, okay. So poll, I need to close it. Thank you for reminding me. Reminding me. Okay, so just to double check, can you see my slide deck now? So I just closed the poll. Awesome. Okay, so basically, DevOps is the end-to-end process, like how you're supposed to develop your solution. So usually process-wise, we start off with the planning phase. So you have to plan your project. For this purpose, we will end up using Azure Boards, which lets you use the Agile project management concepts such as Scrum, Kanban or Kanban board. You can add prod backlogs, sprint backlogs, etc., and so on. And process-wise, after you have planned it out, next you will want to ask your development team to start writing the code, contribute basically. So it could involve DBAs, it could involve administrators writing some scripts, it could involve developers as well who could use .NET, Java, etc. So you have to write your code. And later on, code-wise, we will discuss that you will want to utilize some source control management solution, such as Git. So most people use Git these days, but it still offers you with the TFVC, Team Foundation Version Control. If you're coming from the TFS background, you want to use TFVC, you can still use that. But most people use Git. So you'll basically end up writing code. And then you'll want to build it, compile it, build it, generate your artifacts, your binaries basically. Then you can also choose to run your unit tests and other types of tests as well, like integration tests and whatnot. And once you have tested out your application, you'll want to release it. So release would mean making some configuration changes, getting ready for the production use. Like you could have your web config or app config, application.properties sort of configuration files. You can make changes to those files, point to the production environment or the right environment. And after that, you can deploy it. And release usually also means, do you want to involve some manual approval process? So after you have tested out the application, do you want to deploy it right away without waiting for any approval? Or do you want some QA manager, release manager to approve the build? Click on the approve button and that should end up deploying it. So later on, we'll discuss a couple of terms such as continuous delivery and continuous deployment. So there's a difference between delivery and deployment. So do you want to get some feedback? Do you want to get some approval or not? So based on that, you will either use continuous delivery or continuous deployment. And once your application has been deployed, you'll just operate the application. Your administrators will end up monitoring the application, ensure that if something goes down, then you should have auto fail over sort of functionalities. Like in advanced cases, you could use Kubernetes, Docker containers, and whatnot. So in short, just operate your application, capture logs, trace your application, look at the performance metrics and whatnot. and rinse and repeat. So rinse and repeat would mean that once your application has been deployed, your end users, stakeholders will say that we need more features implemented. So you'll go back to the whiteboard, plan out more things, code more things, build them, test them, and so on and so forth. So it becomes an infinite process. It's continuous refinement process. So DevOps overall, it's the end-to-end process. And yes, it involves culture. You can see that it involves analysts, developers, testers, architects, DBAs, and whatnot. So pretty much every role is involved here. So that's why we usually say that the company culture needs to involve everyone. It needs to be a transparent process where everyone should be on board. There shouldn't be any silos. And automation is also highly suggested when we implement DevOps. We try to automate the process so that the moment you write your code, you check in the code, you check in the changes to your Git repository. It should trigger the build process. It should run some automated tests. And it's also possible to automatically deploy the application as well. So this way, on the day-to-day basis, as a developer, now you just need to focus on the source code. Just write your code, check in the changes. That is it. It triggers the end-to-end build process. Something I'll show you practically in this webinar in just a bit. So automation is highly recommended as well as part of DevOps when we implement it. And tools. So you need the right tool set. So Azure DevOps is the one-stop solution that offers you all of these features. So you don't need to use Jira software for planning. You don't need to use Jenkins for CI/CD. You don't need to use various other third-party solutions to try to combine them. You can use Azure DevOps. And it does let you integrate third-party solutions as well if needed. Like if you need SonarQube for code quality, it lets you do that. So it does let you integrate with other technologies as well, like ServiceNow. If you want to add some tickets and whatnot, you can connect to ServiceNow. So there are plugins available in Azure DevOps. So in a nutshell, Azure DevOps is this end-to-end process. And overall, DevOps is continuous everything. So doing everything continuously. So unlike the waterfall approach where you would plan out the whole thing up front, then write the code for the whole thing, then test out the whole thing. No, you just continuously plan out small bits and pieces. You continuously integrate or build them. You check for code quality so that your build is of high quality. You also add security features continuously. You deploy your application continuously. You monitor it continuously, and you get the feedback from your customers, clients, stakeholders, so you can keep on refining it. And Azure DevOps, it starts off with Agile planning. So Agile planning wise, most companies usually utilize Scrum. Otherwise, you can use extreme programming or some other methodologies, etc. as well. But Scrum is definitely the most popular one. Even if you don't use Scrum, it's okay. You can use just a simple Agile board, a Kanban board where you can just plan out things. But if you're using Scrum, you'll be able to maintain your product backlog, what features you need to implement, backlog items you need to work on. And then you'll break down these backlog items in the form of sprints, where each sprint is typically between 2 to 4 week long cycle. And on the daily basis, you'll basically get to work on things. You'll have your internal meetings, the daily scrum, etc. And you will basically produce your deliverable in a piecemeal sort of manner. So continuously work on smaller features, and every iteration show the demo to your customers, your stakeholders, get the feedback, implement those feedbacks so you can refine your product. So keeping this in mind, how do we utilize the Agile planning portion in Azure DevOps? Azure Boards. So Azure Boards is a small component of Azure DevOps, which lets you do this Agile planning. And before I show you this a bit practically, Azure Boards, we need to know a few terms. So first of all, you will have to create an Azure organization. So in Azure DevOps, you need to first of all create an Azure organization, which is nothing but just a container for projects and teams. So you want to create multiple projects, you have multiple small teams, you want to organize them together. So that's where you get to create an Azure organization. And if anyone is coming from the TFS background, there it's known as collection. So you get to create a TFS collection where you add a bunch of projects that are related to each other, and you also add teams as well. So you have to create an organization first, and next you'll be able to create as many Azure projects as you want. So each project will let you utilize the CI/CD concepts, use the Git repository and whatnot. And it also contains Azure Boards, where you can plan out your project first. So each project will reside in some Azure organization, and it will let you create an Azure board where you can plan out things. So keeping this in mind, what is offered by Azure Boards? Azure Boards lets you use the entire Agile or Scrum sort of concepts. Like you can maintain your product backlog, all the items, wish list items you need to work on. Then you can break them down in the form of iterations. Like let's say a month-long iteration could be there, or you could have a weekly sprint or a bi-weekly sprint could be there. So what you're going to work on in the next 2 weeks or 4 weeks. So you can break down your backlog in the form of sprints. Then you can execute the sprint where you can add your tasks. So developers will be assigned tasks, administrators, DBAs, testers will be assigned tasks, and it will be sort of a checklist. You need to check off the items that I'm done with these tasks. So you can execute your game plan basically. And it also lets you maintain test plans so that testers know what exactly they have to test out. And Azure Boards overall, it also lets you create reports. So at any time, you can say, show me work in item or work in progress items. So what tasks are in progress? What tasks are still getting planned? What are done? So you can get the overall status report, basically. Something I'll show you practically in just a bit. It also lets you maintain a wiki and dashboards. Let's actually see this thing practically so that it makes sense. Okay, so first thing first, you need to have an Azure account. So in my case, I already have my Azure account, and here I can go to my Azure DevOps organization. It's Azure DevOps organization. Then go to my Azure DevOps organizations. Here, I already have 3 organizations. So again, each organization is a collection of projects, related projects, and also teams as well. So you could have multiple departments, and you could organize projects for each department as a separate organization. So this way, down the road, you can configure security as well, and you can add some team to just one organization, but not to other organizations. So it's up to you how you want to maintain your projects. So in my case, I have overall 3 organizations. I'll just focus on this one. And then here, let's say if I go to this one, I already have my organization and I already have a project here. You can create a new project. And in my case, I already have this project. And whenever you create a project in your Azure DevOps organization, you will see a bunch of items on the left-hand side. So for now, we are only going to focus on Azure Boards. Then after that, I'll talk about other features as well. So Boards is your Agile planning part. So once you have planned out your project, next you'll be able to store your source code here in repos. Then you'll be able to create your CI/CD pipelines, automation pipelines to build and also deploy your project by using pipelines. For testers, we can create test plans here so they can go through the run list kind of thing, test out the whole application. And we also have something called artifacts, something I'll talk about later on. But overall, it's basically like your NuGet or NPM or Maven type of package management repository that belongs to your organization. So you can have your internal corporate level, enterprise level packages, and you can maintain them in this artifacts. So in a nutshell, this is Azure DevOps. And you can run this Azure DevOps in your on-premises environment, or you can also use it on cloud as well. So in my case, I'm using it on cloud. This way I do not have to install anything at all, but you can also choose to install it in your on-premises environment if you want. So Azure DevOps comes in two flavors, on-premises flavor and the on-cloud flavor. And overall, the look and feel and features, they are quite identical. Okay, so keeping this in mind, for now, we just want to focus on boards. This is Azure Boards. So when you create a new project, now we need to plan it out. So planning wise, you use this Azure Boards, where you will end up adding your product backlog items, epics, features, use cases, or let's just call them user stories. So user stories, etc. You can add them here. So when you go to this boards, you can see we have work items. I have some random items here, sort of a sample project is here, and you can add a bunch of items. You can add epics, features, impediments, product backlog items, tasks, and whatnot. So not that we will end up looking at the whole thing, but know that you can maintain your entire product backlog here. And you can see this backlog in different ways. Like we have this Kanban board as well. So Kanban, however you want to pronounce it. So here we have boards, and here we can see that it's possible for us to create custom columns. You can add more columns here if you want. And you can add more backlog items here. You can give your backlog item a name. It will show up as a card. And you can also color code your cards. Like here, I have this in green, I have sort of the priority here that it's a must sort of item. We must implement it. This is should. If we get time, we should definitely implement it. We have other type of priorities here. So you can basically add priorities. You can color code things. You can add some business value, effort, like story sizing can be done here. And it's a highly customizable sort of interface. You can add more fields here. If something is missing, add it. So it's a highly customizable UI. And when you add items here, you can initially just keep on adding them here. Then you can say that, okay, we are approving this task, or sorry, this backlog item. Approved would mean that both the product owner, the stakeholder, and the development team, they are agreeing that yes, we must work on it. You can approve it. Then the development team can say that, okay, we are going to work on it, and when they're done, we can move it to done after showing the demo to the user and so on. So in short, Azure Boards offers us this board section where you can add more columns and move them from one column to another. And you can also see backlogs or backlog items like this as well. Like here we have just one feature right now, but you can choose to add more as well if needed. So eventually you will end up adding a bunch of high-level business cases, basically, use cases, basically. So these are not the actual technical tasks. These are just high-level business requirements. And once we have the backlog in place, which would mean it's sort of your wish list. So your customers, they are saying that we need these things in our application. So once this is done, next you will end up working on the sprint backlog. So sprint backlog basically means that your overall backlog, product backlog, is the overall wish list. It could contain literally hundreds of items or thousands of items. But we need to work on it in sort of a piecemeal manner. So what can you work on in the next month? What can you show demo at the end of the month? So that is known as sprint. The sprint is the iteration concept. The iteration means that, let's say, the development team will commit to a 1 month long cycle. So at the end of each month, we are committing that, yes, we will show some demo to the end user and we'll get the feedback. The sprint means it's typically a 2 to 4 week cycle, and it's used by the development team so they can work on things. And at the end of the sprint, they have to show the demo. So sprint wise, the development team will end up picking and choosing some items from this prod backlog and commit to them. And here you can also see that we can add multiple sprints. Like currently it's in sprint number 6, but you can switch to different sprints here. Like if you assume it's a month-long cycle, we have, let's say, 6 months worth of planning done here. So you can go to, let's say, sprint number 1, and you can see that we have the high-level business requirement, which was added by the stakeholder, by the client, by the customer to this prod backlog. And then the development team will take this backlog item and split it into smaller technical tasks. To-do list, basically. Like create a database table, create the login user interface, write the logic for the login UI, uh, write the unit test for the login form and whatnot. So basically, we get to break down the backlog item into smaller technical tasks at the sprint level. Sort of a monthly cycle, if you want to call it, or it can be a bi-weekly cycle as well. It all depends on your team size, your project complexity, how complex it is, and so on. So in short, you get to create your sprint, and we are only going to focus on the coming or this particular month, basically. So we break down these tasks, and then developers will be able to move them from one column to another. We can even assign them as well, who's going to work on it, and you'll be able to add them from one, or move them from one column to another. And you can definitely also specify how many hours of work is required. So how many hours of work is required for each item? You can specify all of the stuff here, something we show in detail in the regular full-blown course. So you can basically track the progress of your tasks. So the goal is to eventually have things in progress. Some developers will get done early. They will hand it over to the testers. And eventually, once testers are happy as well, they will move it to this done column. And eventually, when all of the tasks, they are in the done column, it means that we are ready to show the demo for this backlog item to the user. So at the end of the cycle, the month or sprint, we will show the demo for this one. And if the product owner says that, yes, good job, you did an awesome job, you'll be able to move it from this particular first column to this done column. So basically, we follow some Agile Scrum sort of methodology here. Overall, I'm just showing you the tool set for now, that yes, it supports all of the principles offered by Agile or Scrum and whatnot. So in short, sprint is the monthly or bi-weekly kind of cycle. As a development team, you break down your backlog items into technical tasks, work on these tasks, complete these tasks. And when all the tasks for a backlog item, they are done, only then you say that the corresponding backlog item should be displayed to the product owner, and upon approval, it should be moved to the done column. So usually we keep on going through the cycle. The product owner keeps on adding more items here, and we keep on working on them in the form of sprints. And you can query, sort of create reports at any stage. So you can say that, show me work item type. The work item type, show me only equals, let's say, product backlog items. Show me just the high level requirements. There we can see just the high level requirements. These are business requirements. You can say that, no, show me the technical tasks. You can search for, let's say, task here. You can even add more filters here. You can say that, show me in progress tasks, in progress business requirements and whatnot. So it's a very sophisticated type of system. It lets you query your backlog items, your tasks, your sprints and whatnot. And eventually, the goal will be to complete the whole thing, ensure that as part of each sprint, you have completed all of the requirements. But since it's agile, so usually product owner will keep on adding more items, more wish list items. So it's a continuous development process. So you keep on adding more items here to this board. You keep on working on them in the form of sprints. And yes, it definitely has the support for time tracking, etc. Like in terms of hours of work, what was planned, what was the actual amount. So you can see this sort of stuff as well. Okay, this is basically the Azure portion, and you can also add more extensions. You can add, let's say, calendar and whatnot. You can add, see all of your sprints here. I don't think, yes, I have some sort of events added here. So you can see calendar type of view as well. Okay, let me. Okay, so we have this Azure Boards basically, and Azure Boards wise, you can also do one more thing here. You can also choose to go to this overview, and in Wiki, you can maintain sort of a website for your project. So for example, here we have a couple of simple web pages, like what's the purpose of this project? Or what's the purpose of this particular website that we have here in this Azure DevOps? So you can store any type of custom information here. So overall, it's basically a wiki page where you can store contact information, who we should contact in case of any problem and whatnot. You can also link to other pages as well. So basically, overall, wiki is integrated here in this DevOps, and it lets you create a custom website for your project. So you can add any type of information here, like lessons learned or contact information, or where people should look for some support documentation, etc., and whatnot. So it's all available here as part of Azure DevOps. Okay, so in short, we have the board section. Then once you are done with the planning part, or actually while you're still planning and you're also writing some code as well. So typically when you start the sprint, so sprint means that on the month to month basis or every couple of weeks, you'll want to make sure you show some demo to the end user, get some feedback, which means you need to write your source code. You need to develop your application. You need to check in, check out your code. You need to collaborate with other developers, testers, and whatnot. So you need some source control repository solution. So as part of sprint planning, when you know your tasks that I need to design the user login form, I need to write the code for it. I need to create a database table. I need to create a stored procedure or a .sql script. You need to make sure you check in the changes into your source control repository. So this is also built in into Azure DevOps. So every project, in addition to this Agile board, has this repos, source control repository, basically. The source code repository wise, you will notice that it shows you the URL. It lets you clone it in VS Code, or most other modern IDEs can be utilized as well. So you can link your local hard drive or some folder on your local hard drive to this particular Git repository. Now for this purpose, I already have my other project. Let me switch to that one. Okay, so I should be able to use, let's say, this one. Okay, so here I have another Azure DevOps project. This time around, I'll not focus on boards. We have seen the basics of boards. Now I'm going to show you the basics of repos. So repos wise, notice that I already have a bunch of files checked in here. So typically in the beginning, you will not have any source code at all. You'll basically end up cloning it. You will have to click the clone button. You will copy the URL. You can also choose to select the IDE. It will end up opening up your IDE and it will be connected to this particular repository. So in my case, I already have VS Code. You just click on VS Code from there. So I already have this simple .NET based application, which I've already committed. So here, I'll make some changes and show you how to commit and check out and whatnot. So here, let's say I have this simple message. I'll just change it to something else. We don't even care for the actual source code at all. So when you make any changes on the local machine, it's already tracked by Git. It knows you have made some changes, so it will ask you, do you want to commit these changes? So I can say that, yes, I've modified this HTML file. So yes, please, I need to commit it. So I'm staging the file, and then I'm going to write some commit message here. So modify the home page. And this commit button will only commit the changes in the local repository on the local machine, on the developer's machine. So on the developer's machine, you can make some changes, keep on committing them. But once you have refined the page, you know that it's ready to be shared with other developers, you'll want to push this change. So I can use the push option. So from the local machine, it will end up getting integrated into the remote Azure repos, basically. So when I use the push option, it's currently asking me to enter my password, but you can always configure it so that it doesn't ask you to enter it each and every time. So I'm pushing the changes to the remote repository. So what it means is that here in Azure repos, now you have the latest change from the developer. You can verify here as well. If you open up the page, what was the page name? Index.cshtml, something like that. But overall, it doesn't matter. You can just, let's see if I do go to this one. So I basically ended up making one small change. It was previously welcome to home page, now it's just showing us home page. You can basically commit changes on the local machine on the day-to-day basis, but when you're ready to share it with the rest of the developers, you'll want to push the changes to the remote repository. So in short, we have this repos built into Azure DevOps. So in the bigger scheme of things, you ask end users, customers, clients to come up with their requirements. You keep on adding the requirements here, like I showed you in the previous demo. Then you work on those requirements in the form of sprints, the monthly cycle, bi-weekly sort of cycle. And what it means is that you'll basically end up writing your source code, commit the changes and whatnot. And in advanced cases, it is also possible to say that every commit should be linked to some task. So if you're committing some change into the Git repository, what task have you accomplished? So project management wise, you'll want to find out what did you exactly accomplish? Why are you committing the file? So which checkbox you're going to check off? You can basically even link that as well. So in short, repos is the Git repository that lets you check in, check out the code, and also push the changes so that other developers, they have access to the same source code. The other developers will basically just keep on periodically pulling the changes on their local machine so that they obtain it from the latest version of the source code. So in short, Azure DevOps has planning support. It also has the support for adding source code. And then next, once you have your source control repository in place, you might want to automate the build process, compile the application. Like in case of .NET, you'll want to use maybe .NET build, or if you have, let's say, Maven for Java, you'll want to use MVN package. Likewise, Gradle could be there. You might want to build your application, generate your deployable artifacts, basically. The build can be automated. And this is also known as continuous integration. The continuous integration in the overall Azure DevOps concept means that you write your source code and you keep on compiling the changes, keep on generating new deployable artifacts. Preferably, it should be done automatically. So automation-wise, in Azure, we have a couple of options. You can choose to use this third-party option called Jenkins. But no, we are going to use something that's built in into Azure DevOps, and it's known as Azure Pipeline. So Azure Pipeline is already available as part of Azure DevOps, and it lets you continuously build, compile, and build the application. And when you create the pipeline, you actually have different options. You can choose to use a manual trigger. You can say that, no, I want to build it when I click some button. Or you can say that, no, I want to build it, let's say, on the daily basis at midnight. And actually, the third option is real-time option, the real-time monitoring or trigger. The real-time trigger, something I'll show you on my site, means the moment you make any change to your source code, it will trigger the build process for you. You will always have the latest version of your binaries. The moment you push the changes into the Git repository, you will have the latest build available. So we have manual, click some button manually, or schedule it to run on the daily basis at midnight, let's say, or real time. Git monitoring can be done. So the moment it detects some changes, it will perform the build for us automatically. So let's see this continuous integration concept. So continuous integration wise, we have this pipelines. So pipelines, there are actually two types of pipelines. We have CI pipelines, continuous integration pipelines, and we also have CD pipelines, continuous delivery or deployment. They are known as releases. So let's look at pipelines here first. CI, continuous integration. So CI, all it means is just check out the code from Git and build it. That's it. So check out the code, preferably from this repository, repos, and just build it. Generate your jar files, DLL files, that is it. Package it, basically. Just make sure that the compiled application is available as a file, as an artifact, something you can choose to deploy later on. The CI, continuous integration, is just these two steps. Check out the code and build it. So here in my case, I already have a pipeline. These are the historical executions of the pipeline. And first of all, let me show you what it looks like. So it might seem a bit daunting because we have this script, but actually it's not that bad. You can use these visual activities, just click on them. It gets added as this YAML script automatically for us. So for example, we have the support for building .NET Core applications. We can build Java, or let's say you can search for Maven, etc. and so on. We have Maven, we have Gradle as well. We can build applications using different technology stack. So overall, whenever you use the pipelines concept, if anyone has used Jenkins as the CI solution, so there we typically have this pipeline file called Jenkins file. So we typically add the Jenkins file to our project, and it acts as our pipeline. But in Azure DevOps, the pipeline is typically named Azure pipelines.yaml. So in your project, as part of your source code, this file will be added to the root folder, and it acts as a pipeline. So pipeline-wise, I already have my pipeline configured. It's using the automated trigger, which means the moment my master branch in the source control repository gets modified, it will trigger this whole thing. So it's a real-time type of pipeline that monitors my Git repository. And if the master branch is updated, it triggers this pipeline. And most importantly, here you can see that we have .NET Core added. It's basically building the artifacts, and it's just making sure that the artifact is ready to be deployed whenever we want. So we have the artifact built basically. And to make things more interesting here, if I, let's say, go back to my pipeline and go back to my VS Code, make any change here, uh, whatever. So I've made a small change here. I'm going to stage this file and commit it, push the change. As a developer, I'm going to push the change. And if I go back here to pipeline, you will notice that it will get triggered automatically. Once in a while, you have to just refresh the page, and you can see that just now. So basically, it detected that something got changed in my Git repository, to be more precise, the master branch, and it's triggering the pipeline. It's building my application. You can click on here. You can see the progress here. So you'll see the progress that it's trying to build my application. And it was a fairly small application, so it didn't take that long. And basically, we have our application built automatically. So you just have to focus on writing the source code and just commit the changes. That is it. It will build the binaries, the artifacts, basically. So this is known as continuous integration, being able to go from source code to compiled application. Okay, so next, once you're done with the continuous integration part, you can choose to take it to the next level and deploy the application automatically as well. So automatic deployment, that is known as continuous deployment or continuous delivery, depending on just one small factor. You will either call it deployment or delivery. So deployment or continuous deployment means changes are released automatically. So changes are released automatically after the CI part, continuous integration part. So right away, the moment your application gets built, it gets deployed without any approval. No delay will be there. It will get deployed. Or you can say that, no, we need to ask for some approval. We need to have some button, some QA manager, release manager should approve it. And upon approval, when we click the button, it should perform the deployment. So regardless, whether you use continuous deployment or delivery, you can accomplish it by using Azure DevOps, by using this release pipeline. So release pipeline is also built in into Azure DevOps. And if I, let's say, go here, uh, I'm basically going to use something called Azure App Service. App Service is basically sort of a website kind of solution available on Azure, where you don't need to have any virtual machine, you don't need to have any web server specifically installed. So this app service offers you with the app with the web services sort of features. So here I have this app service. I already have an application deployed here, but I'll show you how to deploy it from scratch as well. So first of all, let me open the URL here. So you can see that I have this website here. Okay, so we have this simple message, welcome to the homepage. So it's a simple .NET application. And here, let's say if I go back to my Azure DevOps, so here I have this release pipeline. So release pipeline basically means, do you want to deploy something or not? I should go to my other project, this one. So release pipeline means after building the application, do you want to deploy the application automatically, or do you want to click some button? So in my case, currently, I have the manual sort of approval concept involved here, which means that no, the application will not get deployed automatically. I need to go to releases and I need to create a new release here. So I can say that, yes, I'm happy with this build. I want to deploy it. So when I click the create release here, it will end up creating a release here. And you can see that it's manually triggered. So I have to click the button manually. And here we can see the progress. It's basically going to take the compiled application and deploy it to my app service. So it's almost done. And I'll show you the code for this one as well to some extent. It's also another YAML kind of file. Okay, so we have the application deployed basically. And if I, let's say, go back here, the old message was this one. But since I've made some change to my code and I have the new build available, it will now show us whatever the new message is. So now it's showing us homepage demo. So it's basically the manual deployment. Whereas if you don't want to deploy it manually, then in that case, you can choose to utilize the, let's say, if I go to edit here, I can choose to say that, no, it should be deployed automatically. So continuous deployment can be configured as well. So this way, it will be 100% automated solution. The moment you make any change to your source code, it will get built and deployed right away. The end-to-end automation is possible here in Azure DevOps. Whereas by default, it's manual, which means I need to approve it. I need to click the build button or release button to deploy the application. So in short, this is continuous integration or compile the code from your source control. And release means deploy the compiled application. And like we discussed previously, Azure Boards is where we do the Agile planning. You, first of all, plan out your project, you identify your backlog items, you break them down into sprint backlogs, work on them on the monthly basis, bi-weekly basis, write your source code, and you can also continuously build and deploy the application. So Azure DevOps is the end-to-end solution, basically. Okay. And Azure DevOps also contains one small thing called Azure Artifacts. So Azure Artifacts, uh, if you are familiar with, let's say, NuGet package manager in .NET, or NPM, if you do, let's say, Angular, React type of development, or there are other solutions as well that let you use NPM, or Maven for Java-based applications. So all of these are artifact repositories, binaries, basically. So say you want to use jQuery as a library, you want to use Angular as a framework, you want to use something else, Log4j in case of .NET, or sorry, Java. All of these libraries, or you can also call them packages, they are hosted somewhere outside of the organization, usually. So what artifacts lets you do is, it lets you create your internal corporate level package management solution. So not that I have anything here, we have it covered in other advanced courses, but here you'll be able to develop your custom, let's say sales data access layer dot whatever, it will be a jar file or something like that. So you want to share this binary with other developers. So when you want to share your artifacts, binaries with other developers that are only available in your organization, you get to use artifacts. So here you'll basically end up publishing your artifacts. So whatever artifacts you have, you publish all of them. And if other developers want to use these artifacts, they will connect to this one. So rather than connecting to NuGet or Maven or something else that is outside of your organization, they will be able to connect to your internal corporate level artifact repository. So in short, it's nothing but just an in-house internal organization level enterprise binary distribution technique, binary file distribution technique. You want to share your binaries with other people. Repos is for source code, text-based code basically, and artifacts is for binaries, binary files. That's the difference basically. And just one quick note here, you can also use this test plans option as well. So it's sort of a manual testing approach. There's nothing automated here. For automation, you'd want to look into Selenium and other third-party solutions. Here you can overall create test plans. And let me see if I have a sample test plan here. Uh, which one should I use? Okay, so test plans wise, you can create simple test plans where you just record different activities that should be performed by the tester, like open the login UI, enter, add username, add password. These act as parameters basically, and we can provide the values to the tester in a sort of a spreadsheet format. So add all of your steps basically, and then the tester will be able to click the button here, it will open up the test like this. And the user will just perform these steps in the same sequence and will say that, okay, I was able to open up the login UI, there was no issue at all. When I entered these credentials, no, this step failed. So you can enter some message as well, like what exactly happened, what was the expected output, what really happened. So this way you can basically record the progress of the tests. And you can look at some reports later on, what percent of the tests were successfully executed, what tests failed, and we can even create bugs from here as a tester and so on and so forth. So in short, in a nutshell, overall, it's sort of the manual process for testing, and it does sort of help out the tester so that we have a formal test list rather than providing us messy Excel workbook kind of thing. Or we basically have this stored in a more formal manner as part of the project. So in short, Azure DevOps is definitely a huge technology. It's an end-to-end DevOps solution that offers us with Agile planning, code versioning, uh, continuous integration to build our application, continuous delivery to deploy the application, artifact management to share binaries with the rest of the developers in our organization, and test plan management is there as well. Okay, so any question regarding this webinar? And we do offer full-blown courses on this Azure DevOps and also Azure Boards. So if your goal is just Azure Boards, nothing else at all, we have this managing projects using Azure Boards. It's nothing but just Agile planning, nothing else at all. Whereas if you want to look at CI/CD, test plans, and code repos and what artifacts and whatnot, then for that we have AZ400 available. So if you have any inquiries, please feel free to get in touch with us, and we can always offer you custom solutions as well if needed. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here with you for this session.